I do hope everybody had a wonderful Halloween weekend. Like Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. I love the fact that little kids can poke fun at things that otherwise would scare them by scaring the snot out of the monsters. And I think that's great. This last week, I had several emails from people regarding due dates and questions about assignments and things like that. And I just wanted to reiterate that you guys are taking an online class because you don't have time to fit a regular in person class into your schedule. And the due dates are there to help people move through the course. And they're not necessarily, I mean, they aren't there for anybody to lose points over or anything. They're just there to help you to kind of keep track of what you're doing and what's coming up. So don't worry if you have to work on one module, a different module this week, and turn in the one that's due on Sunday next week. That's totally fine. You know, because there's several soccer players that are going to be out of town, so they can't make their ink, and that's fine. You just do all the elements that you can do and turn in what you can do when you can turn it in. It is nice to know what's going on, so I don't worry about people. But uh, that's that's the kind of realm you're in when you're in this class. I wanted to talk a little bit today about texture. And this module is about texture and introducing you to the idea of art history. Texture is generally divided into two categories, visual and physical texture, but the two do not exclude each other. Just as an example, on the screen that we're looking at, I can see texture in your hair, your eyebrows, the clothes that you're wearing, the wood behind you, the paneling, but it's all two dimensional. All that texture for me, looking at the screen, is visual texture. But you know, Megan is carefully fondling her hair so that everybody can be their eyes are led to that particular example of texture. But it's very physical to you, Megan, because you can't see it, but you feel the texture of your hair. And so, even though those are the two main categories, they do not exclude each other. They include each other and overlap all the time. Can anybody think of another example of a completely visual texture? Do any of you guys play video games? Have you ever watched a movie? All the things that you see in a movie, that's entirely visual texture to you, right? What can you think of anything that's entirely physical texture? First one, yeah, Leah.
Like the clothes you're wearing,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
the clothes you're wearing, that
Oh, that's weird. The microphone's still broken. You guys can hear me though, right? Okay. The first thing that comes to my mind is the inside of your pockets. How often do you see the inside of your pockets? But you can feel everything. When we look at like paintings, most paintings that are actually paintings and not prints, part of the thing that makes them interesting is the texture of the paint that the artists used when they applied the paint on the surface. Look at what Van Gogh did. He was kind of wackadoodle anyway, but he would hold his brushes in his mouth so he would taste the paint, and then as he switched color, he would take that out, dab it down, and his dabs of paint were more like globs, and so they had a structural quality to them as well. It wasn't just applying color to a canvas. Uh, there's a lot of painters that do that. Jasper Johns would mix paint with wax, and apply that. So you have this very interesting texture with that going on as well. When you see wood, even though the wood itself has a particular texture, you can enjoy the texture visually as well, especially if it's been polished and stained. On the other side, a lot of the things that we see visually have a structural or physical component to them as well, like different kinds of paint. Even though we just see the physical color or the visual color of the paint, and visually it looks kind of smooth, we could also feel if it's glossy or if it has that kind of chalky feel to it. So those two categories describe different aspects of texture, but they are not mutually exclusive. Who can name a physical texture that is also very much a visual texture?
Sitting down, you could see the chair and you can feel it.
And something is going on. Hold on. Okay, it was my problem. Megan, could you repeat that, please?
I said, would it be like sitting down, you could see the chair and you can feel it?
Yeah, that would definitely be one thing. I'm also thinking of just the material that's on the cover of the chair cushion. It has a physical texture to it, but it's also very visual. And sometimes you see colors, the smoother the texture of the color, sometimes the brighter the color feels that it could be. And sometimes the more roughed up the texture of the color may feel a little bit more dull. So you see how the physical and the visual aspects of texture really interweave quite a bit. They overlap a lot. One of the aspects of this module is the senses walk, and it's a 15 minutes walk where you just use your senses as much as possible. This is really good for dealing with stress and tension. I have a nephew who's on the spectrum, and this is a really good thing that his parents do to help him calm down, get to a point where he can feel like he can approach to evaluation of his surroundings again. What you basically do is determine an area that you're going to walk in. It could be a park, it could be outdoors, it could be a hiking trail, it could be a Pine Valley or Snow Canyon or anything like that. And rather than a typical walk, as you move on, pay as much attention as you can to things like what you see, what you smell, how things feel. Touch the bark of trees, touch the edges of rocks, touch the grass as long as you're not allergic to it and you don't rub it in your eyes. Look at everything that you can and feel everything that you can. What makes this different from a regular walk is that you are focusing on how you directly interact with the environment around you. I suggest when you go on this, you bring with you several little bags. And if there are elements of texture that you can bring home with you for this, excuse me, if there are elements of texture that you can bring home with you, put them in the bag. Don't break off anything that's alive. Don't pluck any feathers out of birds or break branches off of trees, things like that. But if you find feathers on the ground, if you find grass, or if you find those little burrs that we get caught in the bottom of our shoes a lot, be careful that you don't hurt yourself, but you can use those as textures. And that would be very interesting. Little rocks, edges of rock, small twigs, leaves. Like Andy Goldsworthy uses a lot of leaves in his work. He loves how those look and feel. So those are all good things to do. So after your senses walk, you're going to come back home and you're going to work on making 6 different tiles for a texture cube. And I talked about how to do that, and there's lots of textures that we can make. What I wanted to do first is list as many textures as we can come up with, because this week's quiz has you write down 12 different textures. And you can use whatever textures we talk about in our video. So I'm going to start, and then you guys go ahead and chime in, and we'll get at least 25 textures recorded so everybody has a long list of stuff that they can use. One of the things that my dad always used to say, if he liked something, was that it was slicker than snot on a doorknob. So I'm going to use that. Slick, slimy, sticky, snotty. That's just 4 textures from that one saying. I'm thinking of gritty, chalky, furry, hairy.
Smooth.
What's that?
Smooth.
Smooth. Yes. Excellent. Thinking of leathery, corduroy, rough, sandpapery, sandstone, granite, the edge of the wood when you see a tree stump that's kind of snapped off, bark, heavy bark, but there's also like aspen bark or willow bark. What other textures can you think of?
Bumpy.
Bumpy, good. There's bumpy, there's lumpy, there's pebbly, ripply, ripples, jagged, sharp. What else? Megan, do you have any?
Do we say gooey yet?
No, that's an excellent one. That's one of my favorite ones. One of my least favorite ones is moist. That word just makes me uncomfortable, but that's a texture as well. Yeah. You know, that dirty, after a long camping trip, my older brother David, don't tell him I told you this, but he wouldn't wash behind his ears on the camping trip, and that kind of area would be a little bit moist and gooey. So pretty disgusting. Slimy, licheny, rough, abrasive, sandpapery. Any more? Kendall, what's another one?
Sticky.
Sticky, good. How about Leah? What's another one?
Prickly.
Prickly, excellent. Megan, what's another one? You have another one, Megan?
Would cold be one?
I bet let's include it. Yeah, we'll do cold and hot too, or warm. Because when you put your hands on surfaces like that, they feel a certain way, don't they? I think that let's go ahead and count it, even if it's not.
Would wet
That's
be
fine.
one?
Wet is excellent. Yes. Dry would be another one. Leafy, both like green leaves or dried leaves, both of those. The bark, like willow bark or sycamore bark or birch bark or fir bark or pine bark. All those are different ones. But yeah, how many do you think we've listed? I think we've done at least 30.
I've been trying to write them all down and I got 30 and I didn't get them all.
Okay,
So,
good.
yeah.
So when you do the quiz, you only need 12. So we've got quite a few, so that's great. And when you make your texture cube, what you're going to do is cut 4 squares out of cardboard. And I have videos of 5 or 6 different artists, and each of the videos are just a couple minutes long. but they show how they use texture in their work. And Adatsui, I really like how he does his because he's basically just recycling garbage. And Weber is recycling garbage as well. And the textures that they get are the things that happen as you move and recycle something that somebody else has discarded. So I think those are kind of interesting. To make the texture on the face, what is fascinating to me is that you can do it in 5 minutes and think it's done. But I want you to spend 45 minutes on each of these because that'll force you to keep adding things to it until it becomes something a lot more than you expected it to be. Things like you could glue down beads on it. You could glue down beads of several different sizes. You could, if say you found a whole bunch of leaves in your walkabout, you tear them where the veins are and glue them down. So the edge of the leaf is glued to the cardboard, and you just see that trailing edge of the leaf. And so, it comes out at you flat like this instead of laying like that. Stacking up leaves like that to make a texture would make it look very interesting. Start almost looking like some weird kind of fur or something. If you're going to use like dried cereal, like cold cereal stuff, like Fruit Loops, you cut those in half and glue them down so that the bumpy part is towards you or the round part is towards you. Don't just glue them flat so you have just see the circles. Maybe you're going to do cornflakes. You could glue the cornflakes down so you just see the edges of the cornflakes. If you do pebbles or anything like that, and you're going to do layers, glue them down with Elmer's glue so that it dries clear and you can do another layer on top of it and see that layer underneath. You can also cut through cardboard. One of the artists that you see uses corrugated cardboard, and he does it so that you can see the corrugations. So maybe you could get another piece of cardboard and cut it in thin strips. So you'll work with just 1/2 inch wide strips so you can see that seesaw pattern of the corrugation on the edge of the pieces. And that's the design that you're making. Peel back some of the cardboard. You could also, one thing that I've done is I had several pieces of cardboard and I cut a different design out in each one and stacked them so you can see a 3D effect, almost tunneling down into the edge of to that tile. You could tear up other cardboard and stick it on. You could roll up paper so you just see the edges of little rolls. Even use candy corn from your Halloween stash, because I know all of you went trick-or-treating, and you can glue the candy corn on that. Maybe part of that is eating the white tips off of a whole bunch of candy corn and eating it down to the yellow, through the yellow on another whole bunch. And so your texture, you see the white, yellow, and orange all bitten off and chewed on or something. That would be an interesting texture. I don't know if I'd want to share with anybody for them to eat it, but it would look very interesting. You have any other ideas of textures you might do? Crinkling up aluminum foil and then painting it with like your tea paints or something. That would be an interesting texture. Maybe doing different ideas with that. Maybe making a string design on the face of one of your tiles and then gluing foil over it so that the string pokes through the foil and you see that shiny element to the foil too. So you could do make a zigzag on one of the tiles, gluing string down, put coat that with glue, and then rub foil onto that and get it so that the foil fits into all those textures and crevices you've made when you glue the string down. And then when you're all done, you just trim the edge of the foil off so you have it ending at the edge of the tile. So there's lots of different kinds of things you can do. Does that give you some good ideas? Right, excellent. The next thing I want to talk about is connection, context, in art history. The second part of this module deals with art history. And it is, for many people, that feels somewhat daunting. But art history is the evidence of the contact that we've made, the connections that we've made as humans with each other over the years. As pardon me, what that came out of nowhere. Pardon me, but it's also, it kind of shares the context that we observe from each of the things that we've experienced, and that's what art history is. When you see an art object, it's evidence that people interacted. That's where the connection comes in. And our exploration of art history is trying to understand that evidence of that interaction or connection. Now, every object is going to have at least 3 different contexts. And I want you to think about this for a bit. One context is going to be from the point of view of the individual that made the item. Let's say you go to a museum and you see a flute that's on display. It's on its own little pedestal. If that flute is 200 years old, there is somebody somewhere who made that flute 200 years ago. That's the initial maker of it. And the context for that person is, what were they thinking about when they created the flute? How did they choose the materials? Where did their experience come from as they were building it? And in that case, the flute perhaps represents to that person their livelihood, because this is what they made to sell to somebody. Second context is, who used the flute? What was the society like that flute lived within? Maybe the person who made it liked performing. Maybe they were a clown. Maybe they were a serious musician. Maybe that was something that they played when they did their regular job. So that second level of context is, how does that flute live within the environment that it was meant to be used within? Then what's the third context? A third context would be you observing that flute on a pedestal. So you're looking at that flute as evidence of history, and you're thinking about the people that may have used it in their regular everyday lives, or the people that may have made it. So it's the same object, isn't it? But that's 3 very different perspectives. Person that made it, the people or society around that used it, and you looking at it when it was pulled from its original context. Or, none of those are better or worse than the others, but can you see that it's the same flute, but it's also different from each perspective? Ibn Khaldun is a hero of mine. He's a 14th century Muslim philosopher. And one of the things he said, he's the father of what we consider as museology today, and a lot of the social or soft sciences. He's the guy that did really articulated a lot of the thought behind the science that goes into studying soft experience, or how social interaction, how societies communicate with each other, the meanings of things, and how that changes when the context changes. Ibn Khaldun said that when you put something on display, it completely removes its meaning and it creates a new item, essentially. Even though that's the same flute that other people touched, the fact that it's on display means it's been removed from both the hands of the maker and the hands of the users. So art is not just some objects that we look at. They are also evidence of people's interactions with the physical world, and they're evidence of what they thought was important and how they communicated. So there's lots of things going on in there. Ibn Khaldun also said, or taught something that I really like. He talked about how history is like a river. Have you ever walked into a river? You feel the water pushing against you, and you see as you move around, you create ripples in the water. Ibn Khaldun said, imagine that water is made up of the ghosts of the past, the present, and the future. And ghosts in this context are the evidence and interactions of a person's life. And he said that everything that is in that river is all the combined knowledge and experience and ghosts of all those people that have lived, hundreds of billions of people that have lived from the beginning of time. And of course, if we're in the middle of the river, a lot of the stuff along the edge probably is going to barely affect us, if at all. So there's a lot of history that we don't really understand or appreciate because it really doesn't seem to impact us. But can you see that there are people that have influenced you in ways that you don't even know, but you still live with the evidence of the reality of their ghosts. An simple example of this is shielded cables that you use in your home were generated in part because in the late 1800s, there was a solar flare that melted most of the telegraph wires in North America. And somebody thought, as a reaction to that, we better shield this so it doesn't happen again. You had no idea that person ever existed, but their ghost influences the stuff that you use every day. Isn't that interesting? So, but on the other side of that, the things that you do yourself become ghosts and affect the people around you right now and the people in the future, but they also affect the people of the past because everything that you do in reaction to the people of the past affect how other people who know you also view the people of the past. So can you see how everything is connected? And that's a good way to think of art history because we'll also be talking about art movements. And when you look at art movements, they are different approaches to art that grow out directly from what people previously have done. So they're reactions and actions that respond to what other people have done that these people interact with. So you can really see a lot of the connections when we start looking at art movements. So the two sets of videos, one set will talk about art history, and that's going to be about 45 minutes of videos. And the other set will talk about art movements, and I think that's about 35 minutes or whatever of video, something like that. And one thing you can do is listen to the videos while you work on your art project too, or other homework. But that's what basically this module is going to be dealing with. Those two ideas. The idea of texture, which is the seventh of the 7 elements of art. Anybody remember what the other 6 are? One of those 6 is shape. What's another one? Line, form, space, value, and color. Thank you so much for your help. That was really, oh, how can I say, helpful. So, and as we move forward during learning about art history and art movements, please also be mindful and remember what are the 4 steps of the tools of artistic critique. What's the first one?
Analyze.
That's the second one, but very good. That's excellent. What's the first one?
Describe.
Describe, then analyze. Excellent. What's the third one?
Interpret.
Excellent. Perfect. And what's the last one?
Evaluate.
Perfect. Absolutely. So use those tools of artistic critique or critical thinking as we move forward, going through learning about art history and art movements. All right? All right. Excellent. You guys can probably tell that I have a cold that I'm dealing with. I'm really sorry that we're not in the same room so I can share this cold with you because I know that you would absolutely love it just as much as I do. Do you guys have any questions about any of the elements of this module? Can you come up with a couple of questions that you think other students might have?
Actually, I have a question. Can
Okay.
for the cube, can you use clay? Would that count as if you make something out of clay?
I think that it would be kind of interesting if you wanted to do 1 or 2 of the tiles and make a clay texture on that, that would count. So you just apply clay to the surface of the tile. I think that would be very interesting. And you can even embed things into the clay. Good question. Another question somebody has asked is, can I do the census walk? Do I have to go anywhere to do it? Well, no, you can walk around your apartment. The big thing about the census walk is spending 15 minutes paying as much attention as you can to how that physical environment around you affects your senses or impacts you. So you're not thinking about what homeworks do, who you know is making you mad, who you know is making you really happy. You're not thinking about any of that. All you're doing is just exploring the smells and the colors and the sounds as much as you can and gathering texture wherever you can. All right, any other questions that you think somebody else might have? All right, then we're good for today. If that's all right with you guys, that'll be it. I sure hope you guys have a wonderful week and take care of yourselves, okay?
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.